So today, I want to talk about bass. I don't consider myself a bass player, honestly. I could mess around with it a little bit. I know some ideas. I'll talk about my approach to the bass today, but I am not a great bass player, in my opinion. I think if you want to be a great bass player, you really need to dedicate some time to it. Because unlike the guitar, well, it is very similar, obviously. They're both stringed instruments, they look similar, they have electronics similar. But there's so many different subtleties you gotta look at with the bass. For example, typically a bass player is going to be using their fingers. You want to keep your nails relatively short because that flesh to the string makes so much difference tonally than, say, if you're going. It's real subtle, but it's really important, as well as the whole slapping mentality. That takes a whole other level of practicing. That's something I can't really get into yet. But I just kind of want to talk about my general thought behind playing bass, just how I think about it. Now, as a guitarist, I'm normally thinking quarterly, in a way. So the opening bass run I did was just that. So if, for example, I'm playing in the key of G, which this is basically just G, I'm just hitting the root, then the third, and the fifth. And then if I continue along in the progression, typically all major chords do 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 do. You know, like if you think of one of Bob Marley's most famous songs. Basically, that's a G, C, D. Now, what you're doing here, the root into a third, and then we're walking up to the root here. And that's the third and the fifth again. Only that's the third and the fifth for a C. And then third and fifth. Now, this is why it's kind of important to know your scales and your arpeggios and really intervals in general. Because a great bassist is always playing one of those intervals. You know, if you're just an entry level, if you're really getting into it, you could pretty much fake it with just the root and the fifth most of the time. And by root and fifth, well, I would have to start getting into a lot more theory at this point. But basically, your root is right here. And on the next string, that would be your fifth. Here. And that works for any chord. G, A, B, C, E, whatever. Works for any chord. And on the bass, it works for any combination of strings. Fortunately, on the bass, we don't have that B separation where it goes from a different fretting, all of that. This is making sense, I promise. So, typically when I'm writing music, when I think of the bass line, all I'm doing is bouncing between those notes. And I do that the entire duration. I'm hanging on to, say, G. If you get a really active bass, like one with heavy pickups, it'll be a lot easier to play those chords. But root, third, fifth. that's all I'm doing for the most part. Once again, I don't consider myself a good bassist, but this is kind of my approach to the instrument. I really just want to articulate the underlying root, the bass of the song. And depending on how I really want to capture the percussive element when I'm playing bass. And that's why people started slapping in the first place, because they didn't have a drummer. So instead of having that snare, your thumb becomes a snare for it. And just a quick talk about slapping in general. Once again, I don't consider myself great at it, but so when you actually slap your thumb on, typically you just want to graze the string and then have it rest on the string below it. Now, I think bass is probably one of the most popular instruments. Every genre, rather than some like bluegrass, is very heavily focused on the bass, and even bluegrass uses bass. Everything needs some type of bass typically. And it's a job in and of itself. Bass is not just a 4-string guitar. It is the backbone and foundation. It is not exactly... It's somewhere in between being a melody and being percussive. It's definitely part of the song that most people can feel. And it's fascinating because of that. So, I went over some quick songs here. If you're starting on bass, obviously stir it ups. My favorite bass line is like the Pixies, which is... And then for entry to slap, or just like one of the first slap songs I would suggest learning is Higher Ground, which the Red Hot Chili Peppers do a version of. Not Stevie Wonder's version, but Stevie Wonder's version is incredible. Just that, if you want to get into it. And typically the slap is followed by a pop-up, which is normally on the octave. So there you go. That's some like food for thought. Anyway, thank you for joining me. This is just today's Tuesday talk. I wanted to acknowledge the bass as an instrument. I'm not a great bassist in my opinion. I can fool around, I can mess with it, but if you want to be a great bassist, you really need to dedicate your time to this instrument. It is a whole monster of itself. Like... Anyway, thank you for joining me. My name is Richard Durazo. This is I like to do at least one Tuesday talk a month, just kind of having a conversation about instruments in general. So let me know your thoughts about the bass guitar. Let me know what you think of it. If you really think it's just a 4-string guitar and anybody could pick it up if you play guitar, let me know. I'm going to say I disagree. There's so much more to this thing that I can't even get into yet. It's compositional, it's a melody, it's percussive. It's so fascinating. And it has so many different qualities, it's everywhere. It's pop music, rap music, folk music, blues, everything. That's not quite, you know, dun, 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 dun. And that's just the root and third on a minor chord. Specifically, that's a G minor into a C minor. So pop music, everything. You know, it's a cool instrument. You need to dedicate time to it. If you really want to be a great bassist, you got to spend time with it. And I don't think I'm there, but you know, the respect for all those great bassists out there, like Victor Wooten's the first one that comes to mind, and then Kim Deal of the Pixies, because I'm a big Pixies fan. Obviously, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, have a great day. My name is Richard Durazo. Tuesday Talk all about the bass. Bye-bye. Alright, as a side note, we did hit 100 subscribers, so my wife is now able to use her regular voice. She got her voice back from the Peanuts. Go ahead and say something.
Allison's face.
Today's video is about bass, and we talked about, you know, how we can make more bass. You wanted to talk about your face, but we didn't make a case for that yet. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'll see you all again soon.
And I didn't get maced.
We didn't get maced.